Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the RationalFanz podcast. That is RationalFanz with a Z. I'm joined here by Evan Kruger,
Matt Bonner,
Rhett Koblenz,
Yo,
and Nate Haynes.
Hola.
First off, we would like to congratulate the Kansas City Royals in defeating the New York Mets 4-1 in the World Series. The only competition they really had was the Blue Jays there, and on their way to the World Series, there wasn't much competition throughout, and the Mets just kind of laid a big egg there in the World Series, and the Royals get the World Series, and
Yay.
they look to next year. They should be high up there along with the Cubs and the Cardinals. And next, we're going to go to we aren't sure where Tim is actually. So we're not going to talk a lot about the NBA. We might add a couple words at the end of the podcast. But there's just so much college football and NFL to talk about today that we're going to stick with college football first. I'm going to say something first, then you guys can take it over and input your thoughts. But the newest college football rankings came out. You have Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, Alabama. Top 4. There's not much debate among the top 3, but Alabama at the 4 is a little iffy. But teams are going to complain. You got Notre Dame at 5, Florida at 10. They can complain all they want, but if they keep winning their games, they're going to get into the top 4. Teams are going to win. They're going to jump up. Teams are going to lose. They're going to fall down. Teams are going to win. If they just keep winning, if they go undefeated the rest of the season, they're going to move in. So stop complaining and just win the rest of your games.
You know, it seems to me like we have a lot of either, neither, or neither situations here. Because, I mean, it's either going to be LSU or Alabama, or neither of them that's going to be in the top 4. It's either going to be Ohio State or Michigan State, or neither of them that's going to be in the top 4. It's going to be Baylor or TCU, but not or neither of them. But it can't be both of any of those sets of teams. So it's going to be interesting how it shapes up to see. Of course, if LSU beats Alabama this weekend, then Alabama presumably can't get into the college football playoff. I don't know. I've seen stranger things happen. I've seen more bias, more SEC bias in my life. As a Big Ten fan, that's something that I'm acutely aware of, but I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see who gets in, because I mean, this time last year, Ohio State, everybody knows, wasn't ranked in the top 4, but they ended up winning it all. So you never know what's going to happen.
yeah, I'm an Ohio State fan, so I'm not too upset because, honestly, Ohio State's been playing a little lackluster lately, so maybe dropping from the number 1 spot gives them something to play for. Maybe because they just thought that was their right to be ranked number 1, but it wasn't. They had to earn that, and now is a good opportunity for them to learn that they do have to earn that ranking. But if I were Notre Dame being the first team out of the playoff, I would be extremely upset because your only loss is to number 1 Clemson, and Alabama has lost to Ole Miss, who has dropped way down in the rankings since their recent decline. And that's just not it's not something I want to see. Is Notre Dame, who has one loss to the number 1 team in the nation right now, being behind a 1-loss Alabama team who's lost to a lower ranked Ole Miss. So there's a lot of things that kind of are surprising with these rankings, but like Evan said, we've seen a lot of SEC bias, and that continues. And like Mason said, it's all going to shake out. So, teams just win.
I think Evan said it best here. Ohio State wasn't in the top 4. They continued to win. They got in the top 4. So if you're Notre Dame, just win your games. That's all you can do.
I mean, they were 14th, so really this week's rankings don't mean too much in the big picture.
Ohio State, all they have to do is win out, and they're in the playoff because everybody's going to want to see an undefeated defending champion try to repeat for their title. And so they've got that working on their side. So all Ohio State really has to do is win the games, and they don't need to worry about anything else.
Well, the thing that gets me, we talk about the undefeated teams too. We have Michigan State undefeated, number 7. TCU undefeated, number 8. Iowa undefeated, number 9. I feel like the committee almost kind of shoved them down there and said, oh, hey, you you're undefeated, but I guess you haven't been playing as good, so we're just going to shove you down here because you have no chance. What? Are you kidding me? Alabama and Notre Dame have already lost. I don't understand why they do that. And they do this with these teams every single year. They cannot overcome their bias. Yes, this is better than the BCS, but I don't know. There's still a lot of controversy that needs to be overcome. I think down the road, they'll probably eventually expand to an 8-team playoff just because you'll get more teams in there and it's a lot more exciting for the fans. And, hey, guess what? You'll make more money, so who doesn't want more money?
On Evan's point, Ohio State was at 14 in the first ever college football playoff rankings last year. This year in the 14th spot, 8-0 Oklahoma State. So, Oklahoma State pulls an Ohio State last year, makes it to the playoff, wins it all. That could be something we see.
One team that people are comparing to Ohio State from last year is Oklahoma. Really good team with one really, really bad loss. They're number 15 right now in the rankings. And if Oklahoma, they have some big games coming up, maybe we could see them as this year's Ohio State. And a thought on them adding more teams, it doesn't solve anything. You went from 2 to 4. Now you went from one team complaining about not being in the championship game to 2 teams complaining about not being in the Final Four. And then if you expand to 8, you're probably going to have 3 or 4 teams complaining. I think that the number of teams that complain about not getting in is directly commensurate to the number of teams that you have in your tournament. I mean, look at the NCAA basketball tournament. You got 68 teams. You have at least 10 teams every year that were on the bubble, that there were 10 other teams that made it, that they say, oh, they shouldn't have made it, we should have made it. So it's not going to get better if you add more teams. It's just saying, you know what, this is our decision and we're going to stick with it. I didn't have a huge problem with the BCS, really. I mean, occasionally you had 3 undefeated teams that you had to choose from, but honestly, I don't know. If you don't make it in, you don't make it in.
If we go to the 8-team playoff, like you said, you have lots of complaining from the 9, 10, and 11 teams. This year's 9, 10, and 11 teams are Iowa, Florida, Stanford. So Iowa, 8-0, undefeated. They do lots of complaining. Florida would do lots of complaining because they should be over Alabama because their only loss was... Who was their only loss to? Now that
LSU.
LSU,
Florida,
that's right. Their only loss was to Florida. And Oklahoma State is still undefeated. So there's 3 teams that are going to complain a lot if we go to an 8-team playoff.
This makes absolutely no sense. Florida's only loss is to the second-ranked team in the nation, and they beat the team that beat the fourth-ranked team in the nation, but they're 10th?
And then to that point, Notre Dame's only loss was to Clemson, so, they're the number 1 team, so we're going to cram them up to number 5. What? Are you kidding me? This is madness.
I would honestly... Coming from an Ohio State fan, I would be okay with Ohio State being moved out of the top 4 in order to make room for teams that have beat good teams, because Ohio State really hasn't beat anybody good yet. Not until the end of their season when they could possibly play an undefeated Michigan State, a 2-loss Michigan team, and an undefeated Iowa all in a row. That's when Ohio State's really going to have to prove who they are. So I would be okay with them being kept out of the top 4 for now and letting other teams come in there who are a little bit more deserving, like Florida.
Well, it's kind of hard at this point because a lot of this is based on strength of schedule, but teams like Alabama or even Oklahoma, Ohio State, their hardest games that make their strength of schedule higher are yet to come for the most part, because you look at Alabama's strength of schedule, which is 3rd, they haven't played the greatest schedule yet. I mean, yeah, they lost to Ole Miss, who has just taken a nosedive as of late. And so, I don't know. I think it's hard to make these rankings until after the season, so I don't know why the committee is even releasing rankings now. I don't get it.
I think it's just really to add more drama, quite honestly, to college football, because it spurs debates like this that we're having right now,
Right.
But, that's the big thing is, like Mason said earlier, it's the best way to say it, just win. If you win, do all that you can to get in, then you giving yourself the best shot. Kind of like last year when TCU didn't make it, they got left out. Their head coach at the end of the season, he said, we didn't do our part, we didn't win all of our games. And so basically with him saying that, he meant, well, we hurt ourselves and didn't make the committee put us in by winning all of our games. And so, that's the best thing you can do is just win, win, and win.
I think that the one reason why the college football playoff is a upgrade over the BCS is that it puts teams' destinies more in their own hand. Because with the BCS, there was more of a likelihood that you could go undefeated and not play for a championship. But here, really, if you win out, it's almost like you're slapping the committee in the face saying, let me in, let me in. So I think that's a great feature of the playoff.
So what you guys are saying, if we did a RationalFanz playoff rankings, we could do it better than the playoff committee.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I think we might have to.
Let's do it.
I think we might have to do that.
Let's just each release our own rankings.
All right.
Big Ten heavy.
Maybe compile them and do like a.
Yeah.
And then at the end we use whatifsports.com and use their game simulator and simulate like 5 games of each matchup. Whoever wins the best 3 out of 5, they move on to the next round. That'd be an interesting thing to do there.
Yes.
So we're doing it.
Sure. Kind of going back to what you said about Oklahoma State being 14th, they're undefeated, and they're at the top of the Big 12. Well, that's only because of alphabetical order being over TCU, but still, they're the same record as TCU, and they're a team that people didn't really consider to be that big of a deal, but this weekend they play each other. TCU and Oklahoma State do. So one of those teams is going to walk away with a loss, and then TCU, they still have to play Baylor. So there's a lot going on over in the Big 12, and it's really going to hurt them because they don't have a championship game, and you have to have 12 teams to do that, and they only have 10. But you can apply for, you put applications in or whatever, but there's a lot of technical stuff in that. But basically the way it works every season, conferences shoot themselves in the foot and take each other out, and we've seen that often enough with the SEC. They just you've got so many good teams playing each other. Like one big at the end of the season we'll see is Auburn and Alabama. Auburn, they don't really have a shot this year, but in the past when they've played Alabama, and they've knocked out one of their, Alabama or Auburn has knocked out each other out of BCS contention just by necessity of playing a tough team that is still good.
Entire Big 12 plays each other with their round robin type schedule. So all 3, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU will have to play each other, along with Oklahoma getting thrown in the mix of all those good teams that have to play each other. And if every team loses once, you're going to get tons of outcry from the Big 12 about how they continuously get gypped from the college football playoff rankings.
I don't think that a one-loss Big 12 champion should make the playoffs, honestly. That's how I feel. And so I complain all you want. You should have won out. I'll never... One thing I wanted to add. One thing that I'll never forget is the year that LSU and Alabama played each other in the BCS National Championship.
Never forget that.
That was bizarre. I mean, LSU, they had that strange, 6-3 game where they beat Alabama earlier in the year, and then they won the championship.
Yeah.
They're number 1. And then somehow Alabama sneaks in behind them with their one loss. And
To that team that they're about to play.
Yeah. And so I just thought, how does that happen? That's before I found out about the rampant SEC bias that permeates college football.
That was during the reign of the SEC when there was I don't know how many championships in a row won by the SEC. I think it was something like that. And then, they shake it up, change from the BCS. And the first year they changed from the BCS, an SEC team gets in. Everybody's griping, they're going to win, Alabama, blah, blah, blah. Ohio State's not that good. Well, the SEC's reign of dominance ended because of the playoff. If they had gone with the BCS system, Alabama might have squeaked in at the number 2 there behind Florida State because Florida State was undefeated, and undefeated, you're automatically better. But that's the good thing about the playoff is it shakes things up and it makes for a lot of interesting games at the end of the season.
Who was the third team in that 2012 race? Because I know it was Alabama, LSU, and another team, but Alabama and that other team, I can't think of who that other team was now.
But probably another SEC team. Probably Auburn.
But that other team, they had a really, really bad loss, and Alabama's only loss was to LSU. So it was just who had the worst loss. Was it this other team? I believe they lost like some FCS team, maybe. Might have even been that low.
We're talking about the 2012 game, right?
Yeah.
The Alabama won 21-0 over LSU.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's the third team?
That's what I'm trying to find here. I thought that game was closer than it was.
That was the first time where it was like 9-6.
Yeah.
And then
that was a crazy season. I think that was about the time that Ohio State was getting hit with those penalties for tattooing in rings. That's a touchy subject.
All right, so let's turn to the actual games that happened this week instead of just sitting here debating about some rankings that mean nothing right now. So, Rhett, I'm going to talk to you first. What was something that came to your eyes this week in college football?
Ohio State had the bye week, and Urban Meyer really stressed the importance of making smart decisions, and JT Barrett did not make a very smart decision at all. Now he lost his scholarship for a term, and he's most likely going to lose the starting job should Cardale Jones absolutely blow Minnesota out of the water. And, we saw this last year that Cardale comes in, and, there's a bit of uncertainty with him, but he proved that he can play well against three of the better teams in the nation, Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon, and he proved that he can play. And so if he comes to play, this week, he's probably going to get that starting job back. But the Ohio State offense is much better with JT Barrett. But, just the thing I noticed was that there's so much drama going on in college football, mainly with the Ohio State quarterback situation. We thought we had it cleared up, but it's not any more clear than it was at the beginning of the season. And so we're right back where we started. So it's going to be interesting to watch how that develops and how that, influences the rest of Ohio State's season.
I just want to make a comment about Ohio State's punishment of JT Barrett. It kind of leaves you scratching your head. He deserves the punishment. He made a stupid decision, but they're taking away his scholarship for the next term, which is this summer, which is when he'll have to schedule a lot of classes because it's hard as a college football player to have a full course load. And so Ohio State's just doing what's beneficial to them, not beneficial to JT Barrett. How is taking away his education and his opportunity to learn a fair punishment? Take away his right to play, but don't take away his right to an education. I don't get that, Ohio State. I don't think that was a smart decision, taking his scholarship for the next term. But on to actual football. Duke and Miami. That was a crazy game, and I have no idea how that crazy 8 lateral play stood. It shouldn't have, really. There's such clear video evidence of the guy on the ground with the ball with his knee down. And instead, they uphold it, and now we have all this controversy. Oh, should they go back and overturn the call? Well, no, you don't want to give the NCAA the ability to go back and overturn games because, I don't know, that could just wreak havoc, and that could end up very, very badly for the NCAA. But honestly, I thought that refs should have gotten it right the first time because Duke's season is ruined now because of a poor call. And so it was an impressive play except for the fact that they didn't actually score a touchdown, Miami. But I don't know, it was crazy. It's cool. They have T-shirts about it now, but I don't know. It's kind of tainted for me.
Going back to the LSU Alabama, Oklahoma State was that third team, and they lost to 6-7 Iowa State. So it wasn't an FCS team, but it was still a pretty low team. And Alabama's only loss was to LSU. So that's why they got in over Oklahoma State or any other one-loss team there. I'm going to turn to you, Nate. What was something you liked from college football this week?
Well, there wasn't a ton of action, but I guess, last week I picked TCU and West Virginia as one of my games of the week, and TCU ended up blowing out West Virginia. And, Trayvon Boykin, I guess, continued his reign of terror, if you want to call that. And, yes, TCU is still ranked number 8 in the college football playoff rankings. But anyway, but yeah, Josh Doxson, he still continues to look like a pretty darn good wide receiver, and he could probably be a first round pick in this next year's draft.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Amari Cooper, honestly. He's just on a higher level of competition than everyone else, and he always seems to make the plays. He's kind of a bigger wide receiver, but I think any NFL team is going to be glad to have him.
My game of the week last week was Pitt in North Carolina. I'm pretty sure I called the North Carolina upset. I don't know if it was on record or not. But I called it North Carolina upset Pitt 26-19. And like I said, North Carolina now is in the top 25 rankings. And they could possibly do some damage. I believe they're still undefeated, but they're like way up there in the rankings. They're like low 20s, high teens. They're undefeated. Watch for them too.
The ACC, in my opinion, no, North Carolina's not undefeated. They got beat early this season by South Carolina.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
First game of the season.
But still, I honestly don't think that the ACC is really that good aside from Clemson. And we saw with Florida State, they started undefeated, and they're just kind of But they lost to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had a disappointing season, and that's probably, if not the biggest, one of the biggest upsets so far in college football. So the ACC, they're not going to get as much consideration outside of Clemson just because of the weak conference that they have.
I want to talk about Baylor for a minute. Honestly, everybody thinks that the world is ending because Seth Russell is hurt. But, they've had a bye week to prepare, and all of their talent is not at the quarterback position. They're actually a really good team, and I think that their offense can still continue to put up points, and they get pretty much a tune-up game here against Kansas State, who's just 3-4 this week. And I don't know. I think that Baylor, if they continue to win, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be in the top 4, honestly, because they're now getting into the tough part of their schedule. And so I think all of that talk of a weak non-conference schedule will fall away unless it's kind of the non-conference schedule becomes the de facto tiebreaker between two teams. Then Baylor would be out. But at this point, I don't see any reason to give up on Baylor. They're a really good team you should watch out for.
I think I said this last week when we were talking about Baylor and Seth Russell, but I think I said that Art Briles doesn't pick random quarterbacks. He picks who he thinks is going to fit in his system. And he's not just going to go, oh, you're good at football, you're going to play for Baylor. No, he picks a guy who can fit into his high-powered offense. And so it's not, this guy's a little bit inexperienced, but I honestly think that he'll be a good thing for Baylor. They might struggle to put up 60 points a game. That wouldn't be struggling at all. But I think Baylor's going to be fine. I don't think they'll get past TCU. But that's just something that we're going to have to watch this season is how Baylor handles losing Seth Russell.
Like Evan said, they get the bye week. And then they get Kansas State, so it's not like there's a tough game for the new quarterback just to step right into and have to play under the lights against TCU. No, he has a bye and then plays Kansas State, and then he'll play. I think TCU is one of the last games because it's a big rivalry there. So that'll be a tough matchup there, but that's way longer down the road. All right, so let's turn to this week's upcoming games. There is a lot on the schedule here for some potential big games. Rhett, I'm going to turn to you first. What is a big game for you this week?
Well, obviously LSU, Alabama, and let's see, Minnesota, Ohio State, not really a big deal. Duke, North Carolina, that one's kind of a big deal because North Carolina's coming off that win over Pitt. Duke's coming off the loss on the botched call. But, that's still a tight race for the ACC. Clemson, I think, is going to win their side of it, but the other side is wide open. But for me, the biggest game this week is Clemson and Florida State. Clemson's undefeated. Florida State's got one loss, and Clemson is first in the ACC Atlantic. Florida State is second. If Florida State should win this game, then they will be first in the ACC Atlantic over Clemson, and that would be a huge upset for Florida State because it would give them a signature win, which every team needs to have in this day and age to look good. It would give them a signature win, and it would give them a boost over Clemson, and it would probably, shorten the gap between Florida State and the rest, like the higher tier of teams, like, your top 5, top 6.
I agree with you on that one there. Nate, what is a big game for you this week?
Well, one that may be a little bit under the radar is the TCU Oklahoma State game. They're both undefeated, 8-0, and it's a clash in the Big 12. So the winner of that game will probably be will obviously be the representative of the Big 12, if you want to put it that way. If TCU ends up winning this game, then, they're going to be pounding the table for higher rankings in the next couple of weeks. So that'll just be interesting to see how that ends up.
All right, Evan, what is a big game for you this week?
Temple, SMU. Huge. No. You guys already... I was going to talk about TCU, OK State, because... we know the committee is no friend of the Big 12, no friend of a Big 12 one-loss team especially. There's only going to be one Big 12 team that gets in. This is pretty much a knockout game to see who's going to survive and who's going to be relegated to a minor bowl game. So that's going to be an interesting game. Other than that, there's some minor skirmishes. Navy-Memphis. Navy's 6-1. Memphis is 8-0, and they're kind of disappointed at where they landed in the rankings. They think that they should be higher than that. Paxton Lynch is a really, really good quarterback, but I don't know. It's interesting to see what's going to become of the American Conference because there's a few good teams in there. Other than that, that's really all the big matchups that there are this week.
I should really get my say in before all you guys take the big games, leading me with nothing to...
I didn't talk about...
went down the list. Let's see.
No,
I'm
I
going to
didn't.
list off every game here.
Well, if you wouldn't start with me first, I wouldn't have to scroll through the list.
Sorry.
Let's talk about LSU, Alabama. No one talked about that yet.
I'm going to go with Notre Dame and Pitt. Pitt is a pretty good team. They were in the top 25 before losing to North Carolina. Pitt's only a 2.5-point underdog to the number 5 team in the nation, and if Notre Dame walks out of there with the win, they'll be right in the top 4 following whoever drops out between LSU and Alabama. They'll move up to the 4th spot, or so I think. You never know.
You do know that if Alabama wins that game, LSU and Alabama are still going to be in the top 4, right?
You're actually probably right about that one.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
But Notre Dame and Pitt is a big game this week. We didn't talk about LSU, Alabama, because everybody knows how big of a game that is. We just don't want to hit on
We don't need more people talking about the SEC.
All right, we're going to turn to the NFL now. We're actually going to start with Evan here on his weekly Colts Suck edition.
All right, I get to start with this. All right, so I'm sure a lot of you watched Colts Panthers, but before I dig into that disappointing, dismal performance by the Colts, I just want to talk about the season as a whole. They're 3-5, and they're still tied for first in the AFC South, But their season has really already gone down the crapper, and here's why I think that's so. Because you come in, and you're a hopeful team. You add all these free agents that you think are going to help you win now, but really it turns out to just be a sick case of get-rich-quickism that really burns you, because you go from a hopeful team that's surrounded by hope, that's new, that's young, that's exciting, to one of the oldest teams in the NFL with a bunch of washed-up free agents that end up not helping your team at all. Trent Cole, Andre Johnson, Frank Gore, they've all been more or less busts, honestly. Really, there's just an aura of disappointment. There's almost a stench of losing around them that you'd expect from the Redskins and the Browns, but not the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, they haven't been this way since the 1990s. And so, honestly, it's not over yet, but I don't think that even if the Colts are 7-9 and make the playoffs, that's an awful season. That's a failure of a season, because making the playoffs from the AFC South isn't a huge deal, and you're gypping yourself out of a higher draft pick, which honestly, it's not like you're going to make use of it anyway because you're the Indianapolis Colts. I mean,
Except with Andrew Luck, that was like the best pick they've ever made aside from Peyton Manning.
Well, I mean, really, they didn't want to do it the hard way with Andrew Luck. Instead of putting pieces around him that could help him win, they went for speed, they went for flashy players, really older free agents that they thought, all right, we want to win now, so we're gonna mortgage our future, and we're going to make sure that we can win now. And it's really blown back in their faces, because honestly, 3-5, this is a team that everybody expected to be contending for a Super Bowl, and now they're fighting for their lives to stay respectable. And I don't see any way out at this point unless they start winning more games.
I saw a sliver of hope on Monday night when the Colts managed to score 17 points in 7 minutes. You can't, no matter how bad you say a team is, you can't do that unless you've got some sort of an offense, which they do. It's just those pieces haven't really all come together. And so there is reason to hope that if those guys do come together, that the Colts will be something special. I think that they have the chance. I think they have the chance, but I don't think that the Colts have gone about this the right way. Firing Pep Hamilton was probably one of the stupidest things that the Colts have ever done. He's not the problem, but that's beside the point. Evan, you can rant again.
All right, so honestly, I think that one of the most important things that you can do with a young, talented quarterback is to put in front of him a young, talented offensive line. And instead of doing that, they've hired guys off the streets and random people with prison tattoos because they're on work release. Jack Mewhort, he's really the only offensive lineman that I can name. Honestly, it's just been hard as a Colts fan to watch it, because Andrew Luck, week after week, he said, I'm the problem. I'm turning the ball over too much. That's something I have to work on. Then work on it! You haven't done anything to fix the problem. 3 interceptions. I mean, honestly, yeah, he's playing with broken ribs, apparently. But the Colts said, I don't know if this is truthful or not, that he was without health limitations before Panthers Colts. And even if he was injured, a couple of the interceptions that he threw, they were just mental mistakes. And that's something that you can't have when you're on a team that really is relying on you to get them the win. You can't afford to have mental mistakes. And until Andrew Luck starts, he fixes that problem, the Colts have no shot at being anything but a mediocre bargain basement team that happens to be in the AFC South. And I'll say one thing about Colts-Panthers. They had 2 shots to win it in overtime. Yeah, it's impressive that they came back from down 17, but then they went back to playing stinky offense in overtime. They had 2 shots to win, and they blew both of them. And honestly, it's hard to stay optimistic as a Colts fan, especially when you have to play the Broncos next week, who proved last week that they actually are a good team. And so I don't know if it's going to get any better. They could very well be 3-7 within the next 2 weeks. And that's all I have.
Well, they play the Broncos this week, and we know that that's not going to be an easy game. The Colts, they have 3 chances in a row to beat undefeated teams. Patriots, Panthers, Broncos. Can't beat the Patriots, can't beat the Panthers. So let's just focus on beating the Broncos, please.
Well, yeah, being a Vikings fan, I know it's hard when your team stinks. But the Colts, they're probably gonna have to clean the house this offseason. That's probably the most realistic option at this point. Thankfully for the Colts, they still have Andrew Luck, so they're still going to contend, in the stinky AFC South. But, they got to build that offensive lineup because, it's been pretty bad this year. And, they need a young, big-bodied receiver, too. I think that's what they're lacking. Andre Johnson does provide a little bit, but he seems to be lazy at times. And so a younger guy who's, more pumped up about football, I guess, would really help the Colts out. But, they just got to start building some consistency.
So let's turn to the actual Panthers-Colts game. Panthers now 7-0, had to go into overtime. As a Panthers fan, I follow a bunch of Panthers fans on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. And people were complaining about the Graham Gano missed extra point, when in reality, I was complaining at the time that he missed it because the Colts went down, got the field goal, sent in overtime. But at the end of the game, I look back and in reality, it might have been a blessing in disguise because as you have it, the Panthers go on to win it in overtime. A win is a win. But if the Panthers make that extra point, they're up 4. And the Colts have 2 seconds to get a touchdown. If they get the touchdown, they win. And they would have had to go for the touchdown instead of kick the extra point. And with 2 seconds left, they decided just to kick the extra point and keep it in overtime. So a loss could have happened had Graham Gano made that extra point.
Well, this is that's against the same Andrew Luck that almost threw an interception in the closing seconds to cost the Colts even a chance at winning. But, I'm sure the Colts are glad that he missed the extra point because, honestly, their offense was kind of struggling. Yeah, they'd gotten 17 points, but hey, at least they had the opportunity to get the field goal, put the ball into somebody's foot that actually knows what they're doing in Adam Vinatieri. So I don't know.
That game was just a turnover fest. You had a combined 6 or 7, I'm not really sure the official count, but you had 6 or 7 turnovers combined on both sides of the ball. Just downpouring rain. Andrew Luck threw 3 interceptions. Cam Newton threw 2, I believe. And then he fumbled it twice. Andrew Luck fumbled it once. So I think that's 8. That is 8 combined turnovers on both sides of the ball. It's just horrendous.
Yeah, that's a turnover fest. But a scoring fest this week. Man, the Saints and the Giants, wow, 52-49. That's like college football right there.
It's like TCU Baylor.
Drew Brees, 7 touchdowns. Eli Manning, 6 touchdowns. 13 combined touchdowns, passing touchdowns of 1 game. That's an NFL record. And that's absolutely amazing coming from 4-4, completely mediocre, maybe subpar average teams. That's just really fun to watch, and I'm glad it happened. Okay, but anyway, let's be serious.
Technically, Drew Brees threw 8 touchdowns, but 1 was to the other team. So
that's true.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yes. But, wow, the Saints, they've woken up within the past couple of weeks. It's kind of surprising. At first,
Beat the Colts.
they're really, pooping around and stuff. But, the Saints, hey, maybe playoffs? Maybe? I don't know. We'll have to see about that. And as for the Giants, man, that'd be hard to be a fan. That's just heartbreaking to score 49 points and lose. That stinks.
NFC South this year, Panthers at 7-0. I figured if you would have told me the Panthers started 7-0 this year, and they might not win the division because the Falcons, Saints are all doing really good, I probably would have laughed at you because the NFC South was so bad last year. But the Falcons are 6-2. They dropped their last 2, which isn't very good. But the Saints have really turned it on, like you said. What are they now? 5-4 or 4-4?
4-4, yeah.
So they've really turned it on. They started 0-3, I think, or something like that.
Yep.
But they've really turned it on.
0-4. 0-5, 0-6. Just
They've
kidding.
really turned it on.
3 wins in a row for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've really turned it on, and even the Buccaneers have some potential upset in the Falcons and the Saints, and even the Panthers. They have some potential upset. Jameis Winston is playing a lot better than he did the first couple games. First game, the Titans blew out the Buccaneers. Oh, Mariota's a much better pro quarterback. These past couple weeks, Mariota's been hurt, and Jameis Winston has really shined in the NFL, winning some big games. They beat the Falcons this week, out of all teams. That was just crazy there.
Yeah, the Falcons, hope you're not falling apart right now, because that's what it's looking like. But yeah, the Falcons-Buccaneers game, that was kind of a turnover fest for the Falcons. They really didn't capitalize on drives when they needed to. And the Buccaneers just stuck in there, and yeah, they ended up winning pretty impressively. And as for the Titans, that's pretty much a dumpster fire. You might as well just start looking forward to the draft, because losing to the Texans, that's pretty embarrassing. And you just fired your head coach, who's, by the way, pretty bad. 3-20 the last 1.5 years. Ken Wisenhunt, he was bad. And then you got some chump Mike Mularkey, who went like 0 and a gazillion with the Jaguars a few years ago. Or he might have won one game, I don't know. But anyway, it's not looking very good in Tennessee right now. Kind of how it has like the last 10 years. So,
bring back Brandon Weeden. How dismal was Matt Castle? 93 passing yards. The only starting quarterback that did worse this weekend was Aaron Rodgers.
Wait, what? Castle had a better week than Aaron Rodgers?
Surprising.
Oh, my. Matt Castle for MVP.
But seriously, how dismal is the Cowboys' offense? They can't run the ball. They can't throw the ball. But even still, they almost beat the Seahawks. And I think everybody's talking, the Legion of Boom is back. Their defense is great. Yeah, their defense is pretty good again, but their offense stinks. They can't move the ball. They can't score. All this promise, Jimmy Graham's coming in. Russell Wilson's going to light it up. That hasn't happened. Their offense is bad. I mean, you got to face the facts that they're not a great offensive team. And sure, you can get away with that against, I don't know, the Cowboys or other stinky teams that can't score. But that's not going to help you as you get into, I don't know, the heart of your schedule against great teams like even the Packers, who I think that was kind of a flukish game for them, or even the Cardinals, who have turned out to be a pretty darn good team this year. And so, honestly, I think the Seahawks are in trouble because they have a lot of issues to fix. Their offensive line has been subpar, and they just haven't been able to move the ball down the field.
When I read the NFL Power Rankings, Week 6, I hadn't seen, throughout the whole season, I've never seen Seattle drop below, the top 10 team. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me? They're 2-4, and they were 2-4, and then their last 2 wins aren't even against good teams. They beat the 49ers on Thursday night, and then they beat the Cowboys. What offense do those two teams have? The 49ers just benched Colin Kaepernick for Blaine Gabbert. You think that's going to help you at all?
Yeah, I think these people that are ranking these teams are having a little Super Bowl hangover. They're like, Seahawks have been in the Super Bowl the past 2 years. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're doing well this season. And it's not like they beat the Cowboys soundly. They had to kick a field goal with a minute or whatever, minute 30 seconds that was left. They only beat them 13-12. That is not very good at all. And I was watching a little bit of that game too. And Marshawn Lynch, I think he's still a little bit. He's being affected by his bum hamstring, even though they might not put it on the injury report. I think that's really affecting him. And, the Seahawks are a run-first, play-good-defense team. And when they can't run the ball, Russell Wilson is forced to do things that he's not comfortable with. And so that's really going to hurt the Seahawks later on into the season.
So this week, the narrative of the entire week could be injuries. You had so many big-name guys go down with season-ending injuries. Keenan Allen.
Le'Veon Bell.
Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah,
Matt Forte went.
Reggie Bush slipped on the cement in the Edward Jones Dome, which was, by the way, a trick by St. Louis to get to L.A. Just saying.
But you had so many big-name guys go down with season-ending injuries. Yep, it was just kind of sad to see, especially for many fantasy teams.
Mm-hmm.
Ricardo Lockett went down, too. Steve Smith went down. Just so bad.
Yeah, so much for that safety first policy that Roger Goodell supposedly has in place. You can try to prevent all the concussions you want and stuff, but players are still going to get hurt, and, well, injuries, especially this week, they're pretty brutal. Luck, it is going to affect the quality of play as these teams are missing their starters that they've had since the beginning of the season. Luckily we haven't had too many major quarterback injuries, I guess you could say, outside of, Tony Romo. We haven't had too many good quarterbacks that have been hurt. And Ben Roethlisberger, but he's coming back too. It's affecting the play, and, a lot of fans, they don't want to see, 45-10 blowouts. That's boring.
I know you never wish injuries on a guy, but I know Evan likes to see Kyrie Robinson.
Well, all right. Let me explain my football injury policy. All right. There are 3 separate reactions that occur whenever an injury occurs. All right. There's my football reaction. Let's say Tom Brady goes down for the season. Football Evan's going to be celebrating because I cannot stand the Patriots. There's also fantasy Evan. Kyrie Robinson's injury is very beneficial to my fantasy team because now they can stop stealing red zone touchdowns from Mark Ingram. I mean, Kyrie Robinson, he had 2 against the Colts. He had 4 this season, 4 that should have been, that could have been Mark Ingram's. And then there's human Evan, who couldn't wish an injury on anyone. You hate to see anybody get hurt. And it's just, it's tragic, really. I mean, these great athletes who are helping out their teams, and then they go down to a freak accident. It's really, it's hard to watch. But honestly, you can implement as many safety first policies as you want. But a lot of what we saw were knee injuries, things that happened within the course of a regular game, not because somebody was targeting someone else, just because a hit happened to land in the right spot at the wrong time. Because most of them were knee injuries, not concussions, and so most injuries are freak tragic accidents. A lot of them happen in 1 week. It's unusual, but there's really not a whole lot you can do about that.
Looking at the fantasy side, so many first-round running backs this year are already done. You have Le'Veon Bell, Jamal Charles, Matt Forte is going to be out for an extended period of time. And if you did your fantasy draft early, Arian Foster was a first-rounder, and he's done. So many big-name running backs this year done for the season already. Already on injured reserve and looking at the backups coming in. Just pretty bad for an NFL fan to see.
Something I want to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings. I honestly think that they've arrived in terms of being a good football team. They've got Teddy Bridgewater, he's playing extremely well this season. And also they've got Adrian Peterson back. And the Vikings, they just look like a really good team. And, they've got the ugly early season loss to the 49ers and a loss to the Broncos, but that was by 3 points. And, they're a win over the dismal 49ers away from being tied with the Packers for the NFC North Division lead. And they're also a field goal away from, being in overtime with the Broncos, who are undefeated, and some people are saying, they might be the best team in the AFC aside from the Patriots. So the Vikings, they've played well this season. It's going to be really hard for them to compete with the NFC North crown with the Packers, but I think they'll get in on a wild card team, and they're going to surprise a lot of teams.
Yeah, with the Vikings, they did almost lose to the Bears, but that was let's just call that clutch. They were down 2013. 2 minutes left. Bridgewater throws that pass to Diggs. Diggs just takes it all the way. Diggs. He's been like 60% of their offense. This past 4 games.
Adrian Peterson's been the other 40.
Yeah. But yeah, the Vikings. They've just been playing. Good, defensive football, and it's been working for them right now. They're probably going to get a wild card spot this year. I don't think that they're going to go too far in the playoffs because I still think their offensive line is going to hold them back. They've still allowed a lot of sacks, and Bridgewater's looked okay this year. I think he might be going through somewhat of a sophomore slump. But I look forward to him. I look more forward to him next year rather than this year. 5-2. That's kind of weird seeing that record as a fan. So
we haven't talked about quite possibly the biggest game of the week in the Broncos and the Packers. That was a huge game. 2 undefeated teams on Sunday Night Football. And the Broncos just basically destroy the Packers. Pretty sure Josh McCown threw for more yards against the Broncos than Aaron Rodgers did. Broncos defense is amazing this year.
It's for real. And not only is it just a good defense like the Vikings have, it's a great defense that they could possibly ride to a championship. Right now, they're looking like one of the best defenses we've seen in the last 4 years or so. I mean, they're just dismantling every offense that they come against. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and he threw for 77 yards against them. And not only that, but Peyton Manning, he came out, and everybody's saying, oh, he's done. He doesn't have the arm strength. Did you see that 47-yard dart that he threw on the sideline to Demaryius Thomas in the first quarter? That was an amazing throw from an old guy. And so, I don't know. I think the Broncos with this win, they've quieted the haters, and now they actually feel like a contender. And so I think that I really do think that they're better than the Patriots at this point. Their offensive line, huge question mark, but the same with the Patriots. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes up.
Broncos face the Colts this week, and then the Patriots next week, I believe. So Colts is kind of iffy. I mean, it could still be a good game. But then the Patriots, you got the best offense versus the best defense.
The Colts are so up and down, mostly down, but up for like 7 minutes of a game when they need to score 17 points. So yeah, it's not like the Broncos can be like, oh, 3-5 Colts, blow them off. No, it's still a big deal because Andrew Luck he's a good quarterback, as we've seen in his first couple seasons. But what's really going to be proving for the Broncos is, if they get to the playoffs, how they fare in the playoffs. Because we know Peyton Manning has been playoff Peyton Manning. But, I think Peyton, in my opinion, he's the best quarterback of all time. And honestly, if he were to win the Super Bowl this season, which I do think is within reach for the Broncos, he would be the best quarterback in the NFL over Tom Brady.
Let's turn to this week's upcoming games. I'm going to start first before you guys take my game. I'm going with the Packers and Panthers.
How did we know that? How did we know that?
No,
but that actually is a good game.
There's one combined loss between the two teams, and that one combined loss was to an undefeated team. So it'll be a really good game there in Carolina. And the Packers, coming off their loss, should have some vengeance, and they should try and take it on the Panthers there in Carolina.
Well, yes, as a Vikings fan, all I can say is please take down the Packers. Thank you. As for my game of the week, I'm going to have to be biased too. I'm going to have to go with Rams-Vikings. A lot of people consider these two teams, teams that have arrived, I guess. The Rams with all-world running back Todd Gurley now, they've been up and down this season. They can't They can't seem to find any consistency. They lose the games they're supposed to win, and they win the games they're supposed to lose. So, with the Vikings now, I think that's kind of an in-between game for them. So I think that'll be a pretty good matchup and a good test for the Vikings offense.
Well, if you guys are biased, and I'm biased, and then Evan doesn't get a game because we're both Colts fans. No, but there's not very many games that are really like standing out to me, other than the Broncos and Colts game. But I'm just going to continue to keep an eye on the games that involve an undefeated team, and just to see how long it takes an undefeated team to lose, because of the 4 undefeated teams that are still undefeated right now, I don't think any of them are going to stay undefeated the rest of the season. So it's just a matter of time before we finally see a loss for those teams. And so every week, those are my games of the week that involve undefeated teams. This week, I don't know how many undefeated teams are going to lose. You've got the Bengals playing the Browns. Browns are a dumpster fire, just like Dolphins and other teams. Broncos, Colts, Panthers, Packers, and Patriots, Redskins. Patriots, I don't see them losing this week. I don't see the Bengals losing this week. I don't see the Broncos losing this week as much as I'd like to see it. And quite honestly, I don't see the Panthers losing this week either.
There's not, outside of the games you guys mentioned, there's not a whole lot that's interesting as a matchup in itself. But I think we need to keep an eye on the matchups that are important for one specific team, like Falcons 49ers, Cowboys Eagles. I mean, the Cowboys, they just their season's done, and the Eagles, they're just trying to stay afloat, trying to stay respectable. Steelers Raiders. The Steelers are trying to keep up with an undefeated Bengals team, and they are they're just trying to stay afloat too. And the Raiders are possibly not that putrid, almost maybe not. So really the Raiders, I'd see them beating the Steelers, and the Steelers could be in trouble here.
Yeah, I find that Raiders-Steelers matchup pretty interesting too. It's going to hurt the Steelers losing Le'Veon Bell. But hey, at least they finally have Ben Roethlisberger back. Maybe he can regain some of that consistency. It kind of looked like he lost last week. And yeah, this will be a good test for Derek Carr, going into hostile Pittsburgh, and, going up against, the Steel Curtain, even though it kind of hasn't been the Steel Curtain this year, still, that'd be a quality win for the Raiders, and we might be talking playoffs in Oakland.
Hopefully we're talking playoffs in Oakland. I've seen them suffer for so long. I feel bad for teams that suffer so long.
I actually know a Raiders fan. Yeah.
Wow.
Don't see those too often in Indiana.
Well, I think most of them just go into hiding since, Rich Gannon left, so.
And that is the end of our show, but within the next coming week or two, college basketball is starting. So look on RationalFanz for our college basketball preview. I'll be writing that here within the next couple days. And our college football rankings that we just decided to write today. As for always, that is the end of our show. Thank you for joining us.